Well, hello everyone. Apologies for a few minutes of delay. We had to get some clarity. Clarity not in what we're going to tell you today or what we're going to discuss, but clarity of image. Tech issues. Is Mercury in retrograde, Jenny? Is that what you said?
Yes, ma'am. And I don't want to be the stereotypical yoga teacher who talks about these things. I legit don't even know much about it. But from what I hear, Mercury retrograde has a lot to do with all the weird techie stuff that we experience. And I am quite sure that's exactly what happened just now. But
I
here
blame
we
it
are.
all on that. But welcome to another episode of Wombs with a View Maternal Musings with Jenny and Sylvia. I am Sylvia.
I'm Jenny.
And we have a lovely guest today. We have with us Megan Pennington, who is an integrative health practitioner, and she is going to talk to us today. First, she's going to explain what that is because I was calling her a nutritionist and she said, no, that is not what I do. So that's going to be my first question. But also today about explaining how we can keep our families healthy, right, Jenny? And this has been one of your not soapbox, but it's important.
Yeah, and I think the reason, as I was saying to Sylvia, Megan and I have known each other for a long time. I would like to call you a friend, but I think acquaintance is probably more realistic. But I think how we actually met was my son was having inflammation issues when he was really wee. So if I'm not mistaken, I actually came to Megan in the first place for a consult and had really good memories of how that went, and it was incredibly helpful. But as we said in the little soapbox. Sylvia and the word soapbox. I have a soapbox. Megan has a soapbox.
We all do.
We all have our soapbox, but Megan's posts catch my attention because we definitely align with what's happening in the world in general. And the post that she had put up just before we asked her if she would be a guest on the show was about taking responsibility for our own health. And you got some comments of cheerleading, like, from me and from other people. But then as always, if you post something like that, you're going to also get criticized. So that to me is something that I would also like for you to speak about is how we can take responsibility for our own health and also for our children, because to say we have no responsibility is, in my opinion, a little
Oh
bit
yeah.
silly.
That is. I agree with you there. So Megan, tell us, integrative health practitioner, what do you do?
So I used to be a dietitian. That's probably where the nutritionist came
Okay.
from. And the reason why I don't identify with that anymore is because it's this box of I prescribe diets, kind of like a doctor prescribes medications. And I walked away from that many, many years ago for many different reasons, which is a whole other story. But so now integrative practitioner means that I take my background in dietetics or nutrition and I integrate it with other modalities such as stress reduction, hypnosis, subconscious rewiring, energy work, pretty much anything that a client needs. I'm usually well versed enough in it to at least get them started, if not bring them through a whole process around it.
Wonder, yeah, that is not the same thing.
No.
If anyone was wondering, that's not the same
And
thing.
are you still working with kids, Megan? Do you still have kids in your practice now?
Yep. Yeah, I specialize more now in inflammatory and immune system related disorders, so that can include kids. Most of the time it's adults that have kind of gotten to their 30s, 40s, and they have this long list of symptoms that have accumulated over the years, and they're at the point where they're ready to take responsibility and say, I really want to do something about this now. So it tends not to be so many kids, but the process works with kids also.
I love the take, not the take. I love that the like taking responsibility for our health. I think many of us take that for granted, but that's just part of our identity, who we are. We want this, but I know people who have illnesses that would prefer just to take the medications and go to the hospital and stay there 3 weeks of every couple of months, get their treatments and come back and still eat like crap, right? They do exist. So I'm assuming those are the ones that push back on you, the ones that do not want to change.
Yeah, and they usually just don't show up in the first place.
Yeah, they're not your clients. They're not
They're
your
not my
clients,
clients.
right? They're not your clients.
That's it.
You're the ones that they're the clients that you have want to change, right? It's
Yeah.
hmm.
They
Well, it
usually
does
have some
become too,
awareness. around the fact that what they're eating, how they're living is contributing to how they're feeling, and they don't want to go the medication route. That's usually the type of client that really seeks me out, is that I know I can go the medication route. I don't want to. I don't want to have the side effects. I don't want to mask the condition. I really want to get to the root. So that's what I aim to solve, is the root, the underlying root cause, not the surface, like hypertension or whatever the symptom is.
Wow.
Jenny, you were going to say something.
Oh, I lost it. Just the whole subject of inflammation is so fascinating to me, and how, you know, many diseases cannot survive in a body that is not inflamed. I don't know if that would lead us to this conversation about these times and COVID. Is
Yes.
there a relation between
Yes.
inflammation? Okay,
Yes.
that was accidental, but let's take that
We can
rabbit
go
hole.
there.
Go
Can
there.
we?
Go
Thank
there.
you.
Yeah. So, well, just as a context, if you look up any symptom, whether it's diabetes or any disease, actually, diabetes, headaches, digestive issues, and you look that up, or you Google it, research it with inflammation, so diabetes and inflammation, you're going to always come up with research that connects the two. Inflammation is involved in pretty much every single symptom of the body and disease process.
What is inflamed?
Inflamed means
What
that
part of us is inflamed?
It doesn't stick to a certain part. It's the mediators released by the immune cells. So inflammation is caused by the immune cells releasing prostaglandins, histamines, leukotrienes, cytokines. These are all these different molecules that create the inflammatory response. And it's this well-orchestrated response. It's supposed to be for a short time frame if you get cut or if you have a virus. But when it's long-term, because foods are triggering it, or toxins are triggering it, or emotional stress is triggering it, then we have this perpetual low-grade inflammation, and it goes everywhere. That's why you can get headaches from it, or digestive issues, or toe pain. Like, it literally can go anywhere.
Okay. I think that's what I'm just listening to you now, and I'm like, I have these visions of, you know, some part of my body is inflamed, right? It gets bigger and then is sick, but that is not necessarily.
And you don't see it too. That's the thing.
You don't
necessarily see the inflammation.
I'm sitting here.
Myself, it will be inflamed, but that's visual.
You guys see, you can imagine what's in my cup of coffee. And I, of course, I come from the Ayurvedic background, which, puts me as a very fiery person, not unlike both of you. So I have lots of fire, and I know in myself I should not be drinking this cup of coffee because it's very inflaming. It causes inflammation in my body.
I thought you were going to say red wine, Jenny. And I was like,
oh, that's a big no-no. That's a huge no-no. Red wine, red meat, all of that stuff. Yeah, no, there's definitely not red wine in my cup, but maybe that would be better for me than this cup of coffee. Anyway, just saying that there's very, very simple things that we have in our diet, and everybody has in their diet or in their day-to-day, as Megan's even talking about, emotional. That's a whole other realm, isn't it? But it's very, very real. Anyway, sorry to just, I'm reflecting on I'll have a sip of water instead of another sip of coffee.
So going back, when you look at all these illnesses plus inflammation, there is lots of research. And that's where you left off.
Yes. What was the original question?
Well, COVID and inflammation.
Right. Yes. So obviously it includes the immune system. So I established that it's involved. Our immune system is pretty much involved in every body process, and that includes the body processes that lead to symptoms or disease. So given that, the immune system obviously is stimulated when you have a virus come in. That's how it deals with the issue. And so because it's creating inflammation is involved in that process. And what research is actually finding is that the difference between the people who get very sick with COVID and the people who don't is an inflammatory process. It's the amount of inflammation or the overreaction of the inflammatory response, the immune response, that's actually creating this tissue damage. And so it is completely involved. This inflammation is very much pertinent to the pandemic and how we're experiencing it.
So people who are getting sicker, who are getting sicker and having longer, I guess, lots of symptoms and getting sick, they have more inflammation to start off with.
Yeah, there's some research that shows that their baseline is higher, and therefore it increases them to a level of more damage than someone whose baseline is very low, and then it just kind of blips.
Like children. So this would say, because you were saying inflammation is often an
Yeah.
adult thing after the habits that we've created over
Wow.
time, that children don't have these bad habits necessarily, hence
Exactly.
they're not getting sick.
Wow,
That's a very
all of these
good-
things are connecting.
Yeah.
Does that mean then those of us who maybe don't have the higher inflammation could very likely have COVID? Is this where the asymptomatic thing comes up? Like, is it possible that we have COVID, we don't have much inflammation, we're not showing any, this is the asymptomatic part. So you can, the people, okay, it's all clicking for me now. Okay, so yes.
Say it. We want to know.
I feel like I just kind of said it. Like, you know, those of us who are not experiencing much inflammation or whatever underlying condition are the ones. So asymptomatic version, you know, I am asymptomatic. I have COVID. No, that's not real. That's not what I'm saying. I don't know, because I've not taken the test. I'm just thinking the difference between the people who are showing any kind of symptom, the people who are showing massive symptoms, the people who end up hospitalized, the people who end up dying. We're like, you know, and then at the bottom of that, there's the people with no symptoms who had the thing, but just, you know, just were taking along perfectly fine in society because there was nothing irritating it. Is that, I got it?
Yes, that is what a lot of the research is showing. Of course, there could be other factors, but that is what scientists are kind of gathering from it.
And you know, on that point too, like one of the big things I'm having a hard time with, I'm sure you and the rest of the world knows I'm having a very hard time with all of it. But do we know more about the possibility of an asymptomatic person even transmitting the virus? Is this, you know, we heard it did and then it didn't. We heard like you could get COVID from surfaces, and then we heard you couldn't get COVID from surfaces, and you know, we keep hearing this back and forth. Do you know what the latest information is?
It has to do with viral load. So even if you're asymptomatic, if you have some of the virus in your saliva, you lick your hand and you put it on a doorknob, whatever, someone can get the virus from that. But of course, if you're asymptomatic, you're not sneezing, you're not spreading your germs everywhere, and you have a less of a viral load probably in your body because it hasn't taken over, because the immune system dealt with it properly. You have a much lower viral load in your own excrements, and so that gets passed to a lesser degree. And so yes, to answer your question, you can transmit, but the chances are lower. Like it's less of a high transmission rate.
Yeah,
because you're not sneezing on people, not coughing on people.
And you don't have a high viral load to begin with, because it hasn't had a chance to replicate exponentially in your body, because your immune system, being that it wasn't over-inflamed and out-resourced, was able to deal with it properly, theoretically.
Thank you.
So let's get into the boosting our family's health. So we're all about that, right? I think all the people who watch us are moms and have children, and you know, the conversations you've been following them, sure, I'm Megan, online, and we're all worried about the schools and kids getting it. What are some tips? How can we be dealing with our family's health?
So I mean, generally sleeping well, trying to not make a big fear or fuss about it, because stress will dampen the immune response. So you're just creating an environment where you're not as able to fight the infection if you do get exposed to it. So I know that there's a balance between like putting your head in the sand and being like, it doesn't exist, and the opposite, but to find a healthy balance in there where you're not freaking out around your kids and they're getting freaked out, but also just taking it in stride and like, okay, this is what's happening, this is what we're going to do about it. Like, that's how you speak to kids usually, to kind of calm them down. They want to know that everything's okay, have the routine. And I think that it's just a matter of finding the balance between that. So there's stress, there's sleep, and then diet, of course. I know that it's sometimes diet can be a tricky subject, because everyone reacts differently to foods. You can actually have foods that are inflammatory for me, but not inflammatory for you. So that's a whole, like, I can dig deep into that.
Show.
It's a whole show.
That's a whole other show, maybe.
That's actually what I specialize in. So I can talk about that for hours, but that's the deeper level immune system boosting or healing or regulating, I would prefer to say, for another time. And then there's vitamin D. So the most researched and probably easy thing to do right now is to make sure that vitamin D levels are adequate, because research has been showing that, and I actually have some stats here if people want to hear them. I just have to kind of look at my computer. I want to make sure I get so low vitamin D, so inadequate levels, this is from research, increased your risk of infection with COVID by 45%, so that's a lot, and hospitalization by 95%.
Well,
so vitamin D deficiency.
And to bring it back to this inflammatory response, vitamin D helps regulate the immune system. It helps regulate the inflammatory response. So that's the connection between these hospitalizations and non-hospitalization, is this inflammatory process, and vitamin D is a key player in that.
Before you go to the next stat, can I ask, do you have anything about vitamin D, COVID, and different areas of the world where we might be naturally receiving more vitamin D from the sun than others?
There are stats that show that in the warmer climates where people are outside and getting more vitamin D, that the infection rates were lower. And there's a lot of factors in there, like just being outside, not cooped up in a house, that plays a part too. But for sure, they're showing that regardless of where you live, if you have a certain level of vitamin D in your blood, you have 50% less chance of getting sick. Like these are and there's 30 plus studies that have been concurrently showing the same thing. And if anyone wants to check on that, just on my website, meganpennington.com, I have a whole article, and it has the link to all of the studies themselves, so someone can really look into that.
Please, you can post it at the end too underneath. Thank you.
Sure, yeah.
Another thing on vitamin D, are there different kinds of vitamin D, like the sunshine versus the D drops? Like I give my family the D drops. I was like, give me out your tongue, and we have the the line. Everyone gets their drop. I love the sunshine, of course, but here we are. I don't know, Megan, are you in Montreal with us? We're going into darker days now, and
and we're not getting vitamin D from the sun. The sun has to be a certain distance away from the earth and at a certain angle, and all these different things in order for the atmosphere to not block too much of the UVB rays that create the skin conversion of sunlight into vitamin D. So it's a it's a bit complex.
It's complicated.
It's complex, but basically what we want to pay attention to is, because you asked about vitamin D from the sun versus vitamin D from D drops. So D drops are great for when you live in high altitude and you know that you're not getting a daily sunlight, or it's too far away, and you can tell that it's too far away because you're cold. Like if you're cold,
even with
the sun's too
out.
far away. And this happens, in our climate between now fall until spring, and so that's a good time to take vitamin D. But it's really just for maintenance, because the difference is that when you get it from the sun, there's an automatic feedback loop that prevents you from having too much. So once your body reaches a certain level, it doesn't convert the UVB into vitamin D anymore, so that you can't overdo it. You can't toxify yourself with it. And what they've shown with vitamin D drops is that if you take too much, there isn't that natural feedback loop. It just keeps accumulating. And then you can actually, if it's not combined with vitamin K and magnesium, sometimes it's going to cause bone loss, because they all work together, right? All the vitamins and minerals, they work together. So if you don't have the synergistic effect, it can cause problems. They saw this back in the like a decade ago with calcium. So a lot of people were taking calcium to calcify their bones, but without vitamin D and vitamin K and potassium and other synergistic nutrients, it was just calcifying the arteries, and people were getting heart disease. So it's the same type of, vitamin D is safer. It's you have to take quite a bit in order for it to kind of reach that point, but even 10,000 units a day, which is what some of these studies are recommending for COVID, are showing long-term, if you were to do it long-term, a decrease in bone density. And so the simple solution to that is get it predominantly from the sun. We store it for about 6 months. If you get enough in the summer, you have stores to utilize.
Okay, so it is,
And
we
then
can store it up.
you
Okay.
do store it, yeah. And then you can just take a normal like 400 or 1,000 unit dose just to kind of maintain, because you know that you're good. You know that you got a lot of sun. That's the best way to do it.
So for adults at this time of year, most people are watching in Montreal. 1,000 per day is enough for us?
For an adult, it should be. If you got enough in the summer, you're probably fine for a few months, even without taking anything. But if you wanted to be sure, you could just take like a normal 1,000.
We don't need to be popping 4 of those.
4 drops. I'm sure there are a lot of, if we're asking it, Jenny, I'm sure there are, sometimes I take a couple of drops, but another 1,000.
Yeah.
So like,
But
I don't want to take too much now.
Is your D drop 1,000?
Mine is 1,000.
Okay. And then for
I know
kids,
they have
Megan,
400 and 1,000. Yeah.
Even easier way. So that's the natural way. Get it from the sun. Then you don't have to worry about it. Just take a low dose as maintenance in the winter. That's kind of the supplement easy way. The other easier way is to just combine it with vitamin K. So like mine, for example, is, do you see this? Let's see. It's vitamin D and K combined.
Oh, combined.
And then you don't have to worry about it. You could probably take as much as you want of this, and because it has the K, so that it's going into the bones properly and not causing any kind of disruption. It's going to do what it's supposed to and not cause any kind of unwanted side effects.
Can you show the brand again? Is that obviously a brand you would recommend?
Thorne is great. There's other brands too.
And you have drops, and Sylvie has drops as well. I have like these gel capsules.
Just check the ingredients. It's really like most vitamin D is, as long as it's D3, not D2, is good. There's nothing wrong with it. What ends up being the difference between the different brands is the other ingredients they add. So you want to find something with just olive oil, or it might say medium chain triglycerides, which is usually coconut oil, something that's just really simple. If you have capsules, just check what's in the capsule, because sometimes they can have magnesium stearate and all this junk in the capsule, right? That's what you don't want.
Well, remember when maybe, Jenny, I don't know if when your kids were born, they used to have the D drops were these sugary, sweetened, horrible things. And when D drops came about, I was like, oh my God, this is so amazing, because that stuff, you would stick it in your baby's mouth and it would just drool all over, and it was sweet and sugary. And now it's just one little drop and it's done. It was so easy. You could put it, on their tongue.
Oh, it's so smart.
On your nipple when you were breastfeeding. It was I think that was a revolutionary change for vitamin D. Thank you, D drops. I'll give you
I'm gonna
paid to mention you.
I had that when I was nursing as well, but recently I bought. I didn't realize. So that's 600. So 600 for a kid in this. For our kids, we're all going to school. One of the 600 should be enough for this time. Okay. You guys would be horrified, like I did. Like I got in this desperate, like, God, they need vitamin D, and I got.
What did you
They're
get?
like the gummies. I got the gummies. Maybe it's not horrified,
gummies.
but I did get gummies, and like they're so happy to take their gummies every day, and I just because I make them take like these really potent Ayurvedic herbs, and then if they do that, they get the bribe of the gummy. That's really helpful, Megan. That's great. So it's a recommendation that in these times, just as a general way for kids to stay a little bit more healthy, COVID, no COVID, a little bit of vitamin D, easy peasy.
Yeah. Are there other COVID, right? I mean, let's say that this is not just a
same
COVID
thing.
remedy.
Wash your hands. Always wash your hands.
Arctic temperature in the winters where kids have runny noses from now until April or May. Give them some vitamin D. Yes.
Yeah. Like and have them be out in the sun in the summer. Have them get their stores built up so that
Was there anything else, Megan? We said sleep. We said there was something else.
I was going to give some more stats on vitamin D. So vitamin D deficiency increased the risk of COVID-19 by 80%. Wow. So someone was 80% more likely to have a diagnosis if they were vitamin D deficient than if they were not. Severe deficiency showed 50% mortality rate, an increased mortality, compared to only a 5% risk for those who had adequate levels. So this is big, these are big numbers. This is significant. And then in a randomized controlled trial, because that's our gold standard, doses of vitamin D as treatment reduced ICU admission by 96%. So if you had COVID and then then if you go to the hospital and they give you high doses of vitamin D, you will get better faster by 96%. So it's significant.
That
People
is,
should
and
be
I've been
advocating
hearing
for
that
this.
as well. I mentioned to you a coach that I know was saying the same thing. Take your vitamin D and vitamin K, and I had
Well,
not
it's
heard
so
about the
simple,
K,
but
so I'm happy that you've mentioned it. Yeah.
this is the thing. It's too simple, right? That's the thing. It's too simple, and there's not enough money to be made on selling vitamin D. So why on earth would the government recommend that we get fresh air and take vitamin D? There's nothing to gain. It's not a conspiracy theory or anything weird. It's just a fact. That's just how it works, and nobody has anything to gain from vitamin D.
Well, I mean, I think I've said, hence them not wanting us to be, they want the kids out. They want them getting out, every day. They don't want to. I had heard about this case during the lockdown where the child had not been out in 4 months, had not been outside of his house. I mean, this is not healthy, right?
No.
We all know. I think we assume we all know that, but there are parents that, especially at the beginning of the lockdown, were very, very, very afraid. And here we are, so afraid that we're keeping our kids from getting the sunshine, especially in the summer. If you have questions for Megan, please post them in the comments. We'd love to hear from you. Are you getting enough vitamin D? What other things are you doing? Are you sleeping enough? Are you worried about this? We're concentrating here on COVID. This is what we're experiencing right now. But this, like we said, is not just, this is our family's health in general. In general, my kids, I feel very lucky. They do take their vitamin D and they don't miss much school, which which has always been, I've been very thankful. But I think diet, like you said, Megan, too, is a big part of it.
Yeah, so vitamin D is one nutrient, but like I said, they're all synergistic. So when you have a high nutrient diet, it's not so much the separate foods, but just nutrient dense foods. So instead of eating chips, for example, or pasta that doesn't have a lot of nutrients, like to have the vegetables, the fruits, a little bit of meat, just to make sure that all the nutrients are there. And then the body is just much better at dealing with itself. We don't have to micromanage it. If we have a healthy body, the body is much more intelligent than up here, than we think we are. So if you just give it the resources it needs, it's phenomenal what the body does.
Can I ask about probiotics? Is this like I've gone in different phases of my life as a mom and just as a human being in taking probiotics, and like Sylvia and I deal with new parents who, if I'm not mistaken, they now BioGaia has a drop mixed with D drops. I might be mistaken, whatever it is. But anyway, even new parents are giving the probiotics as well. Is this something that we could consider over the winter cold and flu, maybe looking at giving the kids probiotics? Would that be recommended?
Yeah. So usually with probiotics, it depends on what, like there are a lot of people with digestive issues that then take probiotics, and it can make it worse because it can aggravate. So it's really tricky. But if the kid has no like digestive symptoms and they're pretty, it's just check and make sure that it's not aggravating something. So if you start it, just make sure that they're not like, oh, I have a tummy ache now, or if that starts to happen, then just discontinue it. But for sure, in general, as a general rule, the more variety of bacteria and microorganisms we have in our intestinal tract, the good ones, the better our health generally tends to be.
We have Sarah. Hey, Sarah. She said, aside from physical health, fresh air and sun is really beneficial for mental health. Yes. Lockdown actually encouraged our outdoor adventures. We started a routine of at least 2 to 3 hours a day outside.
Wow. Good for you, Sarah.
Good for you, Sarah. That is, yeah, that's so important. And that's when I hear those stories of kids not being able to go outside. And even now I'm asking my kids every day, like my son who started high school, did you go outside today? And he's like, he's 3 hours of classes, and the teachers were encouraged to take their classes outside, and they're not doing it. They get into their habits of, being in the classroom, and then they get a half an hour at lunch and then another 3 hours. And I'm like, and then homework, right? So now we're going into these colder months where we don't necessarily feel like going out, and soccer's been canceled and the sports. And then this is where I think that we can as parents look at what we're feeding our children and the vitamins and the supplements.
I
Yes.
make my kids walk to school. We live so far. We live like, we're in Park X and their school's in Outremont.
You're walking. You walk every day. Good for you.
Not every single day. Like it
But a
depends on the
lot,
rain,
yeah.
but at least one direction. If I can get them to walk home from school so we can take our sweet time, it can take a good hour. But Sarah, the 3 hours outside, this is something that for those. So Sarah, I happen to know, lives in Ontario. So she was given a little bit better options than we in Quebec were given when it comes to how we chose to school the kids. And she seems like she's done a really amazing job. But 3 hours outside, this is not what's happening for the kids.
Well,
who
screens
are in
do
school.
not help. I'm finding this summer was the challenge, limiting the screen time and getting the kids outside. But I'm going to do that with my son, Tristan. Get him to walk. He can walk from home. It's probably half an hour, really.
Oh,
not that
do
bad.
it.
It's
Yeah,
not that
especially
bad. At least he would
before,
get out.
he'll be one
Yeah.
of those dads that has the story of, walking up and downhill
They
2
made me
ways.
walk through storms. Yeah, for sure. Jenny, before we sign off with Megan, any last questions? I know we were talking about censorship and about this type of information being censored on Facebook and social media.
Yeah,
Anything
it's
to do with
curious.
alternative healthcare? Megan, you must face this regularly in your career.
Yeah, I would advise people to be very selective with what the general impression that they're kind of getting from their news feed, because for sure I've seen it and so many people have seen it, that we're getting fed what they want us to be, what they want us to see, and we're not seeing the other side of things. We aren't seeing the articles that are saying the opposite. So it looks like everything is a certain way when really we're just not seeing the other side of the painting. And so it just to be aware of that and search for information elsewhere.
Do you have good resources, like to like, where would you send us?
My website's pretty good because
you post lots of stuff?
I post lots, but I post when it's really important. I'm like, this needs to be on the website. Then so it gives like an overview of what to focus on.
Is that this is right? I've got it right here. MeganPennington.com. Perfect.
Exactly.
Oh, I have a question before we sign off, because Facebook, and I always post this stupid shit that I find, and then I always regret it because everybody's going to argue, and it's the people who don't agree with me who will comment, and then it's the people who do agree with me who will send me a friendly private message where I'm like,
right?
Just go post. You get the criticism publicly, and then you get the support privately. But I did just post something about this kid who, because kids, and thank God my kids aren't old enough to be in that boat, because it would be a whole other issue for me personally. But the kids wearing masks all day at school, and then touching the masks with their dirty little hands, and then there's this kid on my Facebook wall who has impetigo from a face infection from. Oh. Yes, it was caused by the damn mask that was on her face all day. We can't. It clearly is what happened. So I have this little cute debate on my wall, and I'll just leave it there. I won't touch it. But the point of not having those grubby little hands came up. So the importance of hand washing. But as I think the three of us know, who are all parents, it's not hand washing that's happening at school. It's hand drenching in sanitizer.
Yeah.
So can we have a moment to look at that and the potential dangers of constant hand sanitization for children all day long, and how that might be affecting the kids' immune systems, because they're all sick. None of them have COVID. They all have sniffles and they have this and that, but they're all more sick this year than they have been.
Yeah, I find that too.
In previous years. For me, it's blatant that it's the shit they're putting on their hands.
There's quite a few chemicals in them. Just from a toxicity level, the toxins bring down the immune response. So there's that factor. But also when we're killing all of the good bacteria on our hands, we are allowing, we're breaking down our barrier, our natural defense. The more good bacteria we have on our skin, that's our first defense, but also internally, the less something like a virus can take hold. So if we're removing part or all of that natural defense, then something that's on our hand, like a virus that gets on our hand, is not going to be overcome by good bacteria. It's just going to be the bad bacteria, and then we touch our face or breathe it in or something, and it's going it's that bacterial or viral load again. It's not being combated. It's not being what's the word, like it's not being subdued by the natural defenses that are usually there. And the issue with the hand sanitizers too is that the kids are like, it's making their hands dry and flaky and like open, like more easy to kind of get chapped and open, and then you have an open wound and then bacteria, that's how you get infections. So there's multiple things going on there, and I don't allow my son to have the hand sanitizer. I called the principal and I said, I do not consent to this, and he is old enough, he's 7, to go wash his hands.
So how does that play into then not doing the thing for the greater good, Megan? Because your kid could then sorry, this will get off track. It's not you understand where I'm going with it. Is it possible that the health measures in schools, whether it's masks or hand sanitizer or the bubbling and not being able to play with the friends they actually want to play with, is it possible that the COVID measures in Quebec are actually causing more problems than? Yes. Okay.
Yeah, I have a whole article on that on the site too. There's a lot of research supporting it. It's not just in our head. It's very much a problem.
Yeah, I know my kid, she said, Mom, it doesn't make any sense. We go in the school, and before we get in the school, they give us hand sanitizer. We get in the school, they give us more hand sanitizer, and then we have to go in the classroom and wash our hands with soap. She goes, I don't think I've touched anything. And I'm like, you're right.
Oh, gosh.
You're right. And then they have to wash with soap. And I'm
but
like,
it's the protocols, and it's like, yeah. So
if you look on the actual FDA website and CDC and our government's website, like soap is actually more effective because it has it disrupts the lipid bilayer of the virus, whereas hand sanitizer is less effective. It's actually not as effective. It's just more convenient.
It's and we see that. And by that same token, I actually understand the logistics of all of the kids lining up and washing their hands 35,000 times a day. They would spend the entire day at the sink. But maybe that's a whole
other topic,
a whole other thing.
Maybe they don't need to wash their hands.
This is what I'm thinking.
When they enter,
just when you enter, one time.
Just when you enter.
Just do it. Soap and water. That's it. Well, hey, this was super informative. Thank you so much, Megan.
You're welcome. My pleasure.
If you have questions for Megan, please put them in the comments. We'll get her to come back and take a look and answer your questions. You can check out her website at meganpennington.com. This has been really enlightening. And vitamin D, everybody, that is the message I'm hearing at the end. I mean, there are a lot of messages, but take your vitamin D, get the kids sleeping, let us get good sleep as well. Take care of our health. Everything will be fine.
Ça va bien aller, hein? À un moment donné, ça va bien aller.
Thanks again. And we look forward to talking to you next week. Right, Jenny?
Awesome. Yes. Thank you so much, Megan. That was really helpful and so simple. Like I was hoping you would come and have just some simple advice of little things, little normal things we can do that we probably should have already been doing in the first place.
We should have.
And most people know these things, but it's nice to have a reminder too, and really just be able to be like, okay, yes, it's been confirmed by various sources. This is something I can do. I think
you're right, Sarah.
Wash your hands and go outside. Ha, ha, ha. You got it, lady. Very good.
Let's go and do that. All right, everyone. Take care. Have a great week. Thank you so much for listening.
Bye-bye.